again, I urge the listeners to check out Jack's books and check out Dr. Brown's writings. And I think that there's just a lot of the conversations that we've been having on the podcast will be further elucidated there. I want, if I could, to kind of maybe bring our conversation and to conclude our conversation by talking about something that has now become kind of a hot button issue, but nonetheless is something that I know that you have personally, have sort of dealt with and have talked about and discussed, and that's sort of the Muslim view and approach towards the sort of BDS movement and where the sort of MLI initiative and program kind of fits into that. And I'd love to kind of have you talk about it, because I know that's something that you are sort of passionate about, and it would be really, I think, enlightening for our listeners.
Well, I think, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
I think that, and it's a big deal for me because...
And feel free to flesh out. I mean, I was free to be
basically for anybody who's listening and doesn't know about this, so this thing called the Muslim Leadership Initiative, which was started by this chaplain at Duke named Abdullah Antepli, who is a senior member of the Gulen Movement in America, if anyone's interested in that. I just think that's actually not irrelevant, considering that movement has historically been very, very interested in building strong relationship with Israeli governments. Right. It was between him and then this organization an institution in Israel called the Shalom Hartman Institute, which is actually a very conservative institute in Israel, which is very pro-army, and during the Gaza war a couple years ago, issued lots of statements in support of the Israeli army. And basically the idea was you take young Muslims, prominent young Muslims, and you take them to Israel to learn about Zionism and learn about Judaism and stuff like that. Now, actually, as Sena Said, who at the time was an independent journalist but wrote this article for the Islamic Monthly, as she revealed in an incredibly important article, which maybe you can, put a link to or something in this. I think it was called Faith Washing or something.
Yeah.
She showed that the Shalom Hartman Institute had actually created this initiative or had engaged in this initiative for the purposes of undermining the BDS movement, the Boycott Divest Sanction movement. Now, if anyone doesn't know what this is an international movement that was spearheaded by Palestinian civil society, which has been received almost unanimous endorsement by Palestinian civil society, that for people to engage in international boycott of Israeli institutions and goods and services, and to divest from investment in Israeli companies and institutions. So this move has actually been very successful. If anyone's been following this, I counted it at least last year. Maybe it's now there's been more, but as of last year, there were, in the last couple of years, there were 7 standalone articles in The Economist about BDS. I mean, this is something that's really, and you can see how states like New York State, New York City, other municipalities and areas in the United States have actually passed laws or regulations trying to ban BDS. France actually last year criminalized BDS. So in France, Je suis Charlie, freedom of expression, etc. If you actually wear a T-shirt saying Boycott Israel, that's a crime. It's actually a crime in France. Mm-hmm. That was upheld by the French courts as of October 2015. That's correct. Now, so this is a very effective movement, and you can tell how effective it is because of the amount of feathers it ruffles and the amount of kind of reactions it provokes. And it's been more effective than anything else, in my opinion, in kind of putting pressure on Israeli government policies. Now, so this movement, MLI, was designed to undermine this movement. So it was to take young Muslims, American Muslims, and basically make them undermine this movement. And not only that, but become exemplars of this. Think about this. This is called Muslim Leadership Initiative. This is an initiative to create Muslim leaders. Now, forget about the fact that it's absolutely ridiculous that any community will have its leadership selected by outside actors who, let's just say, probably don't have the best interest of the Muslim community in mind. Okay, forget about the fact that that's just on its face a ridiculous concept that no one should accept. This is actually, if you care about Palestinian issue, okay, which all these people who went on MLI say they do, okay, if you actually want to do what Palestinians want you to do to help them, they've said, we want you to support BDS. And when these MLI people went to Israel, they met Palestinian leaders, and they all said, please don't do this. Please support BDS. So these people who went on MLI ignored this because they were getting a nice gravy train ride into the good graces of American public square. Now, why is MLI so bad? One, it is designed to undermine BDS. Okay. Two, it actually undermines BDS. Three, it's Muslims who are undermining BDS. Now, mind you, there's all these non-Muslims, like the Presbyterian Church, like a lot of Unitarian churches, like elements of the Quaker Church, like Jewish Voices for Peace, like scientists like Stephen Hawking. About a year and a half ago, around 200, 300, I can't remember the exact number of British academics published an article or an advertisement in, I think it was in the Times or the Independent, saying we argue for a boycott of Israel. I mean, there's all these non-Muslims, even
as a Pink Floyd fan, Roger Waters.
Exactly, Roger Waters. Okay, 2015, one of the most read articles in the Washington Post was an article by two Jewish professors, one from Harvard, one from MIT, and the title of the article was, I think, "We are two Jews and lifelong Zionists, and we're calling for the boycott of Israel." So that was one of the most read articles in the Washington Post that year, 2015. So you can give that link to the listeners or whatever. So all these people, Jews, Christians, atheists, Buddhists, rock stars, non-rock stars, scientists, they're all coming out saying we support BDS. Who's the ones who are going against BDS and undermining it now? It's young Muslims. Think about that disgrace. Now, Black Lives Matter leadership has come out supporting BDS. Mm-hmm. And who's against it? Who's undermining it? It's young Muslims. And not only, by the way, young Muslims, but young Muslims who are very coincidentally now very prominent young Muslims. Isn't that interesting? I find that to be fascinating. Okay, and I'll also go to say I'm not going to name any names, but I'm not sure all these people, let's just say, have the normal amount of skill required to occupy the place they do.
The space that they do, right.
No, I mean, that's just my opinion. I can't prove that. That's. I mean, somebody likes somebody's writing, other person doesn't like their writing. God knows a lot of people don't think that John Tesh should have been as famous as he was. Remember John Tesh?
Of course.
Okay, I don't.
Started off the Entertainment Tonight, correct? Yeah.
But then he had that weird piano career or something.
Yes,
anyway.
He did. Okay, and now he's on, I think, late night radio.
Talk show. You can put this on as a link too for your listeners. But my point is that where are Muslims going to be on this issue? The world is moving. The world is the situation is changing on the Israel-Palestine issue. The Israeli apartheid policies are becoming more and more obvious to more and more people. And are Muslims going to be on the right side of that, which they always were, or are they going to be on the wrong side? Right. So that's the third. I think either the second or the third major problem. The fourth major problem is that again, there has been basically since 9/11. An attempt by the I'll say power elite establishments of American life in the government and civil society. There has been an attempt to create an established good Islam. And there's a great article by a professor in Stanford, I think it's 2011 issue of Stanford Law Review, on creating an establishment Islam. Establishing Islam as a religion. I think I have to get the title for you. But basically, this author just goes through. It's now even it's probably 4 or 5 years old now, the article. But he basically goes through and he shows how there's all this effort by American, let's say, philanthropic organizations, American government, to create moderate Islam.
This Islam sort of that's good Muslim narrative.
Depoliticized. politically neutered Muslims
quietist, pacifist. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who basically just now fall just squarely within the center part of the Democratic Party.
Absolutely.
Now, think about this. Why is as an American, it's my right to have political views. If I don't like American foreign policy, I have every right as an American to say I don't like this policy. If I think that there's a policy that's better for America domestically, I can go and I can advocate for that policy. Okay? The only people who are not allowed to do this are Muslims. They're the only people who are not allowed to have political opinions.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless they want to get up and say, my son died in Iraq and I believe in the Constitution. I'm not trying to criticize the Khan family, but I think it's really telling that the only political statement Muslims can make is that they're willing to go and fight in the army and die in unjust wars.
Correct.
I mean, that's pretty pathetic, right? That just sort of blind militarism is the only political act we can engage in. Mm-hmm. By the way, where are Muslims now actually not politically neutered anymore? It's Muslims who engage in things like Black Lives Matter. Muslims who people like Omar Suleiman or people like Linda Sarsour who are out there as now you might want to say kind of left progressive activists. Now all those organizations also support BDS. Right? They don't go on faith washing trips to Israel. So my point is that when my main concern about MLI is not the Palestinian issue. It's not what's the most effective way to change Israeli policy. That's important to me. But for me as an American Muslim, the absolute most important thing is that young Muslims cannot think, I don't want them to think that the path forward, the path to respectability, the path to influence is through these establishment routes that have been laid out for them.
Yeah.
That's not, you should not take the path of the people who are offering you money, offering you ease, and all they're asking of you is to compromise on political positions. That's not something that Americans are required to do.
Yeah. I myself couldn't think of the name, or I don't know which article you were referencing from the Stanford professor, but I know this is something that Dr. Jackson, for example, Dr. Sherman Jackson, he calls the domestication of religion in America, right? And one of the things that I think often people fail to see or fail to realize is that as we recognize that one of the cardinal principles outlined for us in the Constitution is the separation of church and state, a lot of times that conversation tends to revolve around the fact that, okay, we don't want sort of the official establishment we don't want an establishment of an official religion by the state. But it's not just so much, the conversation usually tends to revolve around protecting the state from religion. But I think that also a salient feature of that is to protect religion, the integrity of religious expression, from state interference. And I think precisely the kind of what you're talking about in terms of the establishment of the good Muslim narrative, these various think tanks and government agencies and so on that are presenting this narrative as what is moderate Islam or what is the good Muslim, is precisely the kind of dangers that the sort of founders were warning against in terms of this sort of intertwined relationship between church and state.
Yeah, I want to be very clear. I think if young Muslims want to go learn about Judaism, that's great. If they want to learn about Zionism, that's great. Okay, if they want to engage in dialogue with Jews and Zionists and whatever, that's great. You can do that anywhere. You can do that in New York. You can do that in Washington, D.C. You can do that in Zurich, in Switzerland. You can do it in Tahiti, for all I care. But the fact that this was being held, and in fact the organizers insisted it was held in Israel. I heard of this from one of the organizers themselves. It was insisted that it was held in Israel. Should reveal what the actual purpose is.
Right.
The purpose is to force people to break the boycott and go in there. Yeah. And Muslims need to. I'm really sometimes astounded by the naivete of Muslim leaders of around my age. Mm-hmm. These guys who are always complaining about uncles and aunties. I sometimes feel that uncles and aunties are much more profoundly, they're able to think in 3 and 4 dimensions. A lot of these young people my age, I'm just are you actually this naive, or are you just perpetuating this naivete because it allows you to make the kind of choices you make. I mean, when people say, well, like this mosque near my house just issued a couple weeks ago, this poor guy got arrested by the FBI for, material support of terrorism. And, first of all, he just was arrested. So he's just presumed innocent. Presumed innocent. Second of all, he probably didn't do anything anyway. Third of all, we all only know the track record on these issues. They issued a thing, thanking the FBI for arresting him. I was like, what in God's name? Like, do you issue things for the FBI thanking them for arresting, a drug dealer the other day? You're issuing, who does this? Who actually issues, press releases thanking someone for going into their community and probably provoking a crime? And by the way, why didn't that mosque issue something saying we support this person's family? We're there for them to help them in this tough time.
Right.
So, and people don't even bat eyelids at this anymore. This is how Muslims have been. They've really been beaten into this. They've been beaten into positions of subordination where they don't even assert their rights as Americans. As Americans, you don't have to write thank you notes to the FBI for arresting somebody.
That's right.
That's their job.
This is just subordination apologetics writ large. Yeah, absolutely. No, I really appreciate your comments, Jack, especially on this issue of MLI. And for full disclosure, I know we talked off air about this. For our listeners, we've had previous guests on the show. We don't need to go into names. You can go back and listen to those episodes who have either themselves been a part of certain MLI cohorts or regardless have written or spoken in favor of them. And so I felt it was our duty to, at the same time, to feature someone who offers a passionate alternative voice to that narrative. And I really want to thank you for that. And thank you for putting it on the record, as it were.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you for the entire episode. We're going to go ahead and wrap. Jack, it's been really a pleasure. Where can people find you online, perhaps engage you if they're interested in doing so? I guess I have a Facebook page. Okay.
And now I'm on Twitter, although I have an agreement with my wife, which is that she has to approve everything I want to tweet. Because the reason I didn't go on Twitter until now is because my mouth is really huge. I mean, I really I'm not
we'd be remiss not to mention. We'd be remiss not to mention your wife, Layla Larian, who herself.
She's
a rock star. We need to have her on the show. So
she's a Peabody award-winning journalist and RFK Journalism award-winning journalist and two-time Emmy nominee.
I didn't.
Yeah, she's the.
I didn't know what the Emmy.
She hasn't won it yet. She hasn't won an Emmy yet, but she's at. Yeah. So So anyway, yeah. So then also.
You're on Twitter, but it's subject to approval from.
And then also you can email me at my just Google Jonathan Brown Georgetown or something like that. You'll find my email address. Or that's probably the best way to get in touch with me.
Wonderful.